The earliest memory I had as a child was of the large doll my dad made. My dad was always skilled at toy and doll making, and even made some out of metal. My doll was called Charlie. It was a large bunny that was always tattered. It had bones like I did, except Charlie's were made out of metal. I never liked the 4-foot-tall doll. It felt like it was watching me everywhere, and it appeared in locations I didn't put it. That doesn't matter though. I burned the doll a long time ago. But since then, my dad dedicated his life to making life-size dolls. He never sold them, he just kept them in his old lonely house. But I got worried. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he hasn't left his house. The last thing he told me was that he was doing the work God told him to do, by making a new and improved doll. I was worried that maybe he became a delusional old man, clinging to his dolls. I drove down the roads of my old town. The sun pounded down. Very few people walked the cracked streets, and most of the houses were old, with destroyed wooden boards that barely hung on. I drove past the old school that was now empty as could be. I got a text from my older brother. "I heard you were visiting Dad. Good luck." Dad's gone mad, I swear. I rolled my eyes as another text came through. "Did Dad ever send you pics of his doll?" A shiver went down my spine as I replied a simple yes. I recalled him sending me pictures of 6-foot-tall dolls. They had deep cuts revealing their metal bones. They always looked old no matter how recently he finished them. My brother didn't bother me with this text anymore, allowing me to keep my eyes on the road. I pulled up to my dad's house, looking around at the neighbors. Honestly, it surprised me that there was more than one functional house in this town. The wood house used to be colorful and pretty, but now all the paint was chipped away, and the long yellow grass gave it an unnerving feel. The tall yellow grass tickled my knees as I approached the front door. I gave a hard knock to the splintered, sun-damaged door, but there was no answer. I tried the doorknob, but it appeared the lock was the only thing in the house kept in good condition. Despite me slamming all my body weight into it, it didn't budge. I paced as the wooden balcony creaked underneath my footsteps. That's when I got an idea. I used to sneak out of my second-story window and onto a part of the roof so I could watch the stars at night. The question was, how do I get on the roof? I walked over to that side of the house and investigated the area, but there was nothing. That was until I noticed the shed in the backyard. There was probably a ladder in there. I walked through the tall grass again to the badly damaged shed. I stepped on something producing a loud crunch, and when I looked down, I could barely make out old bird bones. I gagged and continued onward. I made sure the shed door wasn't locked, and thank goodness it wasn't. And with my luck changing, there was an old rusty ladder leaning against the wall. I grabbed it, nearly cutting my arm on a large out-of-place piece. I dragged it through the grass and to the roof so I could climb up. I cringed as the ladder unfolded, shrieking and bending. It was unstable, but it would work. I climbed up, worried every step I would fall down, but I didn't. I crawled onto the roof, causing some tiles to fall down. I walked over to my old bedroom window, noticing that the mold had grown around the window frame. "It's too late to turn back," I muttered to myself as I pulled the window open. It wasn't locked, but it was old, which made it hard to open. The mold separated as I lifted the creaky window. I jumped in and immediately started coughing. The room was dusty and smelled very bad. Every step on the carpet released dust and grime into the air. I looked around my old room, nostalgia filling my head. Metal bones and trash skewed across the room as a doll laid in my bed. It was a tall replica of Charlie, and rips revealing the metal bone. On my desk were small wooden dolls that resembled me. It freaked me out. I shivered as I felt uncanny fear in my gut. I opened my old door, making the familiar creak that made it almost impossible to leave during the night when I was a kid. I often had daydreams about when life was easier, when Mom was alive and Dad wasn't like this. I wanted to check the master bedroom first, so I made my way down the hall. The wallpaper was all ripped and wet, and the railing I placed my hand on gave me a splinter instantly. I peeked my head into my brother's bedroom. A doll laid in his bed as well. It was a human made of leather, with bulging eyes and teeth. The tattered blue wallpaper was a clear contrast to the red words written all over the walls. It repeated God's work over and over in red paint. The sight of that made my stomach churn, as I came to the realization my dad wrote that. It felt like it was straight out of a horror movie. I continued my journey to the master bedroom. The master bedroom door had a lock, but it crumbled as I opened the door. The sight disturbed me to my core. In the bedroom was an extremely similar copy of my mother. On the wall there was a board, with red string and thumbtacks. There were many papers, pictures of his dolls, and us. The divorce papers my parents signed, and many birth certificates. They all led to a picture in the middle of the sky, with red words written on it. God? ? Many other words were scribbled on the pictures. Most of them just said words of confusion and anger. Nothing that made sense. "Dad? Dad, are you here?" I yelled. There was no response except the chirping of crickets under a rug. I shuddered, turning to go downstairs, and was met with more dolls. They were hung on the walls by either their neck or their arms. There were all assortments of human-sized dolls. Some were missing limbs or eyes. Some were even missing their heads. But there were dozens. I tiptoed down the stairs as I heard music. It was old and sad music. I swear some of the dolls moved as I walked past. Some bumped my shoulders, and as I reached the bottom and looked away, I felt something grab my arm. I whipped around to see that the dolls were the ones holding me. I yelled, hitting them away and running into the living room. The living room looked as bad as everywhere else, with cigarettes and empty beer cans littered everywhere. The somber music came from a record player sitting on a small metal table. Dolls that represented our family a long time ago sat on the couch staring at the TV with a shattered screen. I heard something muttering and turned around to see one of the dolls' heads move. "Dad, this isn't funny," I called out. Of course, I was genuinely freaked out, but more so, I was worried. I was worried my dad might be dead somewhere in this mess. I wiped tears from my eyes, venturing further in the house. In the kitchen, Mom's classic shepherd pie was laid out on the table. Maggots and mold ate at it with intense hunger. The only one at the table was my mom, except she was missing her hair and her face seemed off. I mean, of course it did. It was a doll, but it looked off compared to the other dolls I had seen. I cracked open the rusty fridge, revealing the most disgusting smell I have ever smelled. A bunch of rotting food and empty beer cans were in the fridge. I heard what sounded like a crash coming from the basement. It looked like my mom from the table turned her head to look towards the basement door. I knew I should have left, but I needed to know why and how my dad was doing this. I needed to understand. I cracked open the basement door and was relieved to hear somebody mumbling and walking around. I walked down the stairs as more rusty metal bones were scattered across the stairs. When I reached the bottom, I saw the state my dad was in. He was rather skinny and it looked like he hadn't slept in forever. He reached his hands over the pile of raw, bug-infested meat and shoved it in his mouth with a disgusting crunch. "Dad, what in the world?" He shot around, surprised yet relieved to see me. "I didn't see you there. Come over here. Come on and see what I've been working on for the last couple of years." He ushered me over to a large doll. It had wires and circuit boards attached everywhere, and it was 7 feet tall. Much of its body was only metal bones, except its upper torso and its head. Its torso was some sort of meat, all stitched together. It wasn't leather, it looked weirdly human. Its head was metal with a wide short snout. The metal was painted purple and its eyes were green. I pushed the possibilities that it was something bad out of my mind. After all, this was my dad. The same person who would drive me to school without a complaint. The person who let me cry on his shoulder after I got bullied. The person who worked hard to give me a life even after they divorced. Isn't it beautiful? Tears dripped from his eyes. He hardly looked like the same person, but his soft-spoken voice was the same. "No, Dad, it isn't. This thing is weird and creepy," I admitted. "God told me to do it. Every night he whispers to me and gives me inspiration. He said doubters like you would come." "No, I'm trying to help you. Let's go. I will get you the help you deserve." I grabbed my dad's arm, but he slapped it away and yelled, "Look, there's too much evidence. He said he will get rid of the pleading." He raised his voice more than he ever did, pointing at a board. The board had sketches of specific dolls with names of people I recognized. "Every day and night, I hear their voices, and he promised me if I build him a physical body, they would stop." He said this like he believed it. To me, it was nonsense, but this was his world. The thought of it stopping, it's too beautiful. He rubbed the metal arm. "Dad, how many people live in this town?" I asked gently, grabbing his arm. "Everyone that used to live here died. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it. Somebody told me to, but I had to make sure nobody knew. So then, the numbers grew." He sobbed as I backed away. Did you kill them?" He didn't answer, but instead fell to his knees, sobbing his eyes out and repeating, "I'm doing God's work. I'm doing God's work. I'm doing God's work." I decided to just get out of there and call the police. As I tried running up the stairs, his newest doll grabbed my arm, letting out a metallic shriek. I pulled away but was no match for the doll's metal bones. I hit it in the face, hurting my arm in the process. But after the 5th hit, it let go. But at the same time it felt like I broke my hand. I bolted up the stairs as the whole house shook. I darted through the house as the dolls all screamed out with voices I recognized and knew. Some didn't have legs, so they crawled, and some didn't have arms, so they just ran at me. But I outran them, only receiving minor scratches till I got to the front door. I frantically examined the dozens of locks as the dolls called me by my name, and trampled each other to get to me. I twisted the deadbolt and unchained the last lock as they turned the corner. Their ghostly screeches pierced my very soul. I swung open the door and sprinted as fast as I could to my car, not looking back for a second. I turned the key and sped off while dialing 911. The lack of people had a whole new meaning, as I left the town to hopefully never return. I don't know what will happen to my dad, and frankly, he gets whatever will happen to him. I just can't help but wonder where my mom is. Which doll is she, and is it possible that I was his next victim?